I'm John Batchelor. Gordon Chang, the Daily Beast, my colleague and co-host, is in Singapore. We now look to the South China Sea, which is a very large body of water claimed by the People's Republic of China, the PLA Navy, militarizing the Spratly Islands in the south of the South China Sea and the Paracel Islands in the north of the South China Sea, threatening neighbors in all directions, and now moving to the east, Scarborough Shoal, which is rocks just barely above the waterline, but it's within easy striking distance of Manila. It very much compromises the first island chain, which is a way of limiting the aggression of the PLA Navy. And the Scarborough Shoal is now said to be a vital interest of the PLA Navy, that is, Commander-in-Chief Xi Jinping. Donald Trump's speech today, mentioning China in an aggressive fashion, focused on economic contest, did not speak to the South China Sea. So we'll set that aside for now. This is not the Trump administration, it's the Obama administration. We welcome Harry Kazianis for National Interest to comment on what we've learned these last weeks and months about Scarborough Shoal. Harry, a very good evening to you. I will be blunt. The Sydney Morning Herald, within these last 48 hours, a piece by Peter Harcher, who's a senior national foreign correspondent. The headline, "The Scarborough Shoal on the brink of war with China." Do you believe it, Harry? Is someone ready to shoot, that would be the U.S., Japan, the Philippines, over the encroachment on Philippine soil, Philippine waters, by the PLA Navy? Good evening to you, Harry.
Good evening, John. I think you make a good point right at the opening here. The Scarborough Shoal is within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. In other words, within the 200 miles economic radius that the Philippines controls. This is Philippines waters for all intents and purposes. This is their territory. I don't think that's really something that's in dispute. And that's what makes this situation very, very different and very, very dangerous. If the Chinese were actually to reclaim Scarborough Shoal, and actually there was a very interesting report in The Diplomat that Australian intelligence thought that the Chinese might actually dynamite Scarborough Shoal, blow it up, and actually rebuild this island into some sort of military fortress. That is a tremendous change in the status quo. Keep in mind, this shoal is extremely close to the main body of the Philippines Islands and very close to new U.S. military bases where U.S. forces are going to rotate in and rotate out. So this would have a tremendous impact on the status quo. Keep in mind, on top of all the other things that Beijing has done in the South China Sea, whether we're talking about reclaiming 7 different islands, building new islands, incredible stuff, building airfields, putting fighter jets on those airfields, putting air defense systems in, anti-ship missiles, sonar nets, which doesn't get reported very often. So the list goes on and on in terms of the ways that they are changing the status quo. But Scarborough Shoal is very different and very escalatory.
Gordon?
Harry, in your excellent piece in the National Interest, you suggest that the United States put a destroyer by Scarborough Shoal to send a message to Beijing. Do you think that the Chinese, who are able to bring significant force to bear in any part of the South China Sea, do you think that they would harass that destroyer?
I think, Gordon, that's very possible. Actually, that was in the Wall Street Journal in a very, very good op-ed about the South China Sea, which I think is more such op-eds are needed. But I think the point is very clear. The United States needs to take a stand somewhere strategically in the South China Sea. And I think Scarborough Shoal is the place to do it. There's a lot of things that we can do. We could do a destroyer. We could park one right off the Scarborough Shoal and see what the Chinese do. If they were to try to escalate tensions, then I think we know what the game here is. But I think there's a lot of things we can do besides a destroyer. I think the first thing is we need to continue these FONOP operations that we've been talking about, or freedom of navigation operations. There was a report today that the United States actually canceled the third operation that they were going to do, which I think is a big mistake, which sends the wrong messages to Beijing. The other thing we need to continue doing is we've recently started doing A-10 flights over Scarborough Shoal. We need to continue that. It lets the Chinese know that we mean business. But I also think there's other things we can do as well. We should be providing UAVs or drones to the Philippines so they have real-time intelligence of what's going on in Scarborough Shoal and not have to put their men and women in danger. But I also think we should be providing satellite reconnaissance in that area around Scarborough Shoal so we let our Filipino allies know what the Chinese are exactly doing. So I think if we do have a combination of these things, I think we're going to show the Chinese that we mean absolute business in the South China Sea, and hopefully they'll start backing away.
The administration is making no attempt to educate the American people about the crisis. And is that purposeful, Harry? And does that mean that there's no opportunity for the Obama administration to move before January?
Well, you know what I think is interesting, John? I think this administration has no coherent grand strategy, and I think that's the problem. You know, a couple of years back, the United States, President Obama had said we were going to pivot to Asia, we were going to rebalance. It was the ultimate foreign policy bumper sticker, ultimate slogan, but it never really materialized. This administration has had problems with Russia and Ukraine. It's had one crisis after another over ISIS, lots of different problems in the Middle East, and all of those issues are things that we need to focus on, but considering the tensions and the massive challenges that the rise of China creates, that needs to be the number one focus. And this administration has not provided that focus. So it's no wonder the Chinese have pushed a little bit further every couple months, every few years. And now we're at a crisis state within the South China Sea. So I don't think it's no wonder where we are. If this administration had actually had some sort of focus, I don't think we would be here today.
Gordon?
Harry, you mentioned the world being afire. It's not just the South China Sea or East China Sea in Asia. You have, as the other places you mentioned, Ukraine, Syria. This seems to me to be extremely dangerous in the sense that you have a crisis in one place can really spread to the other. Do you think the chance of that is high or low, or how do you see this?
Well, the thing that's very dangerous, Gordon, is you have all these amounts of different places that have problems and massive foreign policy challenges. And when the United States shows weakness, when we allow our military to degrade to the way it's done, and I'm not saying that we have to spend $1 trillion every year on our military, but when you actually fund your fighters and your armed forces to be able to train adequately, to have the equipment that we need, that we're not flying 60-year-old bombers like the B-52 and old aircraft that aren't replaced year after year, it creates massive challenges. When we don't back our allies adequately, whether it's against ISIS or whether it's with Russia, you send signals of weakness that other countries like Russia and China, great powers that are going to rush in to fill the vacuum. So when you leave the world afire, things are just going to keep getting worse and worse. So I don't think this administration has done a good job focusing on these problems, and now we're in the situation that we're in where somebody else is going to have to pick up the ball and fix it in mid-crisis, and that's a very hard thing to do.
Harry Kazianis of National Interest, Gordon Chang of the Daily Beast. Gordon, is this a topic in Singapore's headlines, or is it just on the margins of foreign policy?
No, but there are other South China Sea stories that have consumed Singapore in the last couple days. China trying to split ASEAN, for instance. But South China Sea and Scarborough, not so much.
Gordon is in Singapore. I'm in New York. I'm John Batchelor.